quarantine period. And how's this for a once-in-a-lifetime experience? I just cannot believe this. I remember hearing over the course of many years that there was a pandemic that was almost certain to happen and we'd be very unprepared for it. And it's one of those things where I believed it, but I kind of didn't pay it too much mind because, you know, life continues as normal. Well, there you go. I'm going to start off with a tune for you that is kind of one of the ones that seems to be pretty popular online. And it's a tune I dedicated to the late, great Michael Hedges. crowd goes mild. I know you're out there, but this is still fun and weird. Anyway, but great. I know how Stephen Colbert feels now, doing a show from his living room or whatever. Great. The only bad part is square is still showing up on the screen. Oh, really? There's a nice dumb square on the screen. Well. It's funny, Jeff from Jamplay and I spent about an hour this afternoon getting everything just right, and now my camera has decided to put a square around my face. So you get to follow the square all through the show, because there's nothing much I can do about it now. So there you go. Awesome. Question, okay, great. So let's see what their questions are. Great. Here comes a question. How long have you been playing? You sound great. Well, thank you very much. I am an old guy now. I'm well into my 50s, and I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old. So just about 50 years, long time. But as far as being a professional musician, it's been just over 30 years. I sort of decided to take the plunge into being a full-time performing and composing and recording musician in my late 20s. So yeah, I just sort of celebrated my 30th year on the road last year. So there you go. Another question. Tell us a bit about your audio setup. Sure. Unfortunately, I don't have a second camera to sort of show you, but I try to keep my audio setup not too complicated. My guitars are outfitted with K&K systems, so K&K is a company in Oregon. They make really great stuff. kksound.com is their website. And yeah, they do everything very sort of bespoke, handmade kind of stuff. And their stuff's a bit expensive, but it's definitely the best sounding. And the system that I've got in this guitar is it's called the Quantum Trinity system. Quantum Trinity Mini, I think. So what it is, it's a 3-piece piezo that actually sticks to the bridge plate under the strings here. So it's not in the saddle. It's much nicer sounding when it's not in the saddle. Doesn't get that quack quack sound. And then that's a condenser microphone that you might be able to see there in the sound hole. So those go out with a stereo cable, and then over here, probably just out of the shot, there's a bunch of preamps, and the preamps are they power the microphone and they help blend the two signals together. And for each guitar, I'm coming out in mono, and today I'm going to a little splitter box that goes A and B between two guitars, going through my pedal board, which consists of things like an octave pedal that I kick in and out, a chorus pedal that I kick in and out, a reverb that's on 24/7, a little TC delay, which I only use a little tiny bit every once in a while, and everything's being regulated by a volume pedal. So it's not ridiculously crazy, but it's enough gear. Setting it up for this was fun. The tuning I was in for that tune is like it's kind of like a C7, and I slowly went out of tune, but it's a low C, so it's a really low bottom string, then a G, then another C. It's a new string, so it went flat. So C, G, C, then another G. So basically on the bottom four strings, you kind of have this like power chord kind of thing. And then on the second string, I've got a B flat. So it's sort of built-in seventh to the chord. And then the top string is another C. So if I just do this, I get a bunch of C's and G's, right? And the piece itself is in C minor, so it works out really well for this tuning. And you can play in C major really easily too. And is there a technical term for the spread of the frets? Yes, it's called a fan fret system. So this guitar and the other one I'm going to play a little bit later, it's even more pronounced. The whole idea is that with the frets like that, you end up with more tension on the bottom strings. So it allows you to tune like that bottom C. Really sounds lovely. On a lot of guitars, that would sort of be flopping around and you're getting a bit of a string fart, but that's all right. It sounds pretty good. A very strong fundamental note that you get that way. So it gives you that extra advantage of being able to tune well below pitch and still sound solid, And then some people feel that it seems to improve the intonation a little bit up the neck. Sort of makes sense. All guitars are always out of tune. It's an inevitable consequence of our tuning system, the equal temperate system. But this mitigates some of the physical problems that you have with guitars, a little bit, anyway. And great. So I'll play another tune here for you. Thanks for your questions, by the way, really good ones. And it's cool. I'm sure they're coming in from every which way, all the way to my eyeballs here in Nova Scotia. So in case you're wondering, Nova Scotia is all the way east in Canada, pretty much. And Canada's east coast extends further east than the US east coast. So we have 2 extra time zones east of Eastern time, believe it or not. So Jam Play, who's hosting this, they're based in Colorado. So I'm actually 3 hours ahead of them on the clock. And Nova Scotia is this beautiful province that's almost an island. Basically, it's just attached to the mainland of Canada by just one little strip of land. So there's ocean everywhere you go. And lobsters in season all year. So that's kind of cool too. Anyway, when quarantine is over, come for a visit. It's a gorgeous place, especially in the spring, summer, and fall. You know, the winter is like winter in most parts of North America. It gets kind of rainy here and cold, but it doesn't snow that much. Not where I live, anyway. So this is a very finicky tuning I'm getting into. It's not very far from what I was just in. So from bottom to top, it's C, G, E flat. So that string is a semitone higher than normal. An F on the G string, so it's a little lower than normal. And you only have a major second between those 2 strings. And a B flat there, that's the same as the last tuning. And then I tune the bottom string up to a D. You end up with this very beautiful C minor 11th chord. And a minor 11th, if you're interested, is what's called a chord extension. So it's C minor, C, E flat, G, and then it's got the B flat, which is the 7th, it's got the 9th, which is D, and it's got the 11th, which is F, all stuck in there as well. This is the title track from my most recent album, and the tune is called A Million Brazilian Civilians. And I actually wrote it as a demo for Swedish House Mafia, the electronic dance music band. They asked me for some demos, so they didn't use it, so I did. twice, so it sounds like I wrote that way. Yahoo! All right, so head office says take the guitar level down just a tad. Okay, just a tad. There we go. Okay, we have more questions. Yahoo!
Okay, everybody. This
mailbag.
question is... Oh, sorry, we're talking over each other. This question is from Kevin Cavanos, and he says, can you give us a slowed-down example of your technique?
While we wait for the next question, I'm just going to get in tune from next. The question is, can I give a slowed-down example of my technique? Well, there's a lot of different techniques at play, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to bring up my tuner here because my pedal tuner decided it doesn't want to work. I don't know why. So bear with me while I lean forward. Come on, tuner, where are you? Oh, there you are. I had to find out which screen it wanted to be on. So I play fingerstyle. Now, fingerstyle is a really wide open category. It's not really a genre. It's just a way of playing. And, you know, classical guitar players have been playing fingerstyle forever. But the whole sort of fingerstyle with that name, that's a relatively modern moniker for music mostly out of North America, mostly played on steel strings. And what I do with my right hand is like a really sort of way out extension of something that used to be called Travis picking. Well, it's still called Travis picking. Merle Travis was a guy who was a country blues player mostly in the middle of the 20th century. And he played with his thumb and his first finger kind of like... He'd get grooves like that going with just his thumb and his first finger. I realize my volume's down. And then eventually, especially in the 60s and 70s, people started using their middle finger a lot more to play, so thumb and index and middle. And then in the late 70s and early 80s, a lot of people started using their ring finger as well. So they started, really making all of these fingers very equal. So there's a few exercises you can try to get adept at using all your fingers, because at first, especially this one, feels really weak. And for example, I often give my students a little polyrhythm exercise to develop a lot of independence between fingers. You can do it with just two strings like this. That's a 3 against 2 polyrhythm. You can flip it around. So I've got 3 beats in my index finger for every 2 beats in my thumb. Then you can turn it into a little arpeggio with your fingers like this. You've still got 3 notes in your fingers and 2 notes in your thumb. And then you can alternate with your thumb. And then add all your bass notes. So that's a little example of how you can develop a lot of independence between your thumb and your fingers. Now what I've done is I've taken it to the next level in terms of my thumb and my fingers being interdependent but very independent. And that takes a long time. And some of my pieces use kind of really wacky extended technique, which would be far too laborious to explain in this format. But thanks for the question. And do I have courses for pick players who want to learn fingerstyle? There are some on Jamplay. In fact, I've done several series of lessons for them. And there's one that is really dedicated to Travis picking, so you might want to check that one out. Commercial message for jamplay.com. So check it out. I did that series a few years ago, and it's still up, I'm sure. And I've done 2 other ones for them. I did one more theoretical, and another one, I can't even remember what the third one was right now. But anyway, there's been several. My long-term goal eventually is to have my own site where I do that kind of thing, and I can sort of really talk at length about a whole lot of different things, but that's a content creation problem. But now that everybody's quarantined, maybe I have time. Unfortunately, I'm also doing a master's degree right now online, so my school hasn't stopped. I'm doing a master's degree in music composition for film, television, and video games. So I think that's maybe my future, because the live music thing is becoming more and more of a problem every year. Alrighty, so I'm going to do a tune for you here that came in as a special request when I let the internet know I was doing this. I got a request from a good friend of mine who lives in Minnesota. He lives in the Twin Cities area, and his name is Andy Brown, and good friends with him and his lovely wife Allison. And now, I'll admit, Andy, I haven't played this tune in a little while. Not for any good reason. I love this tune. But I've been listening to it a lot because I recently orchestrated it, and I played it last year with a symphony orchestra. It was a lot of fun. So I'll do my best, because it'll be a little rusty, admittedly. And I wrote this tune many years ago. This one was about 23 years old. Hasn't started yet. All right, here we go. This is called New Aaron. Made it. That's a big tune. Big tune that I wrote a long time ago. So fortunately, still remembering it. That's awesome. Tons of cheering in the chats. That's nice. I can hear you sort of. Virtual cheers, making their way to my virtual ears. All right. Next question. If I would keep it simple, what would I choose as my go-to pedal? Hi, Jefferson City, Missouri. Well, of the pedals I use, I think there would really have to just be two that I really would have a hard time living without. I'm not a big reverb fan, but that said, when you plug a guitar in, if there's no reverb at all in a hall that is not very reverberant either, it's just too dry sounding. So I use a very subtle amount. I mean, hopefully it sounds subtle. I'm not monitoring right now. It was before, but through headphones. But I've got my reverb set at a very, very subtle setting. So it's there. It just adds a bit of live sort of vibe to the sound without being overpowering. I'm not a big fan of reverb. I think it tends to cloud the issue a lot of the time. But a reverb effect of some sort is really pretty indispensable. And I used to live without one, but then I thought, no, it's dumb. And the other thing I would really miss if I couldn't kick it in every once in a long while, I don't use it very much, is a nice sounding chorus pedal. Now, choruses were kind of all the rage in the 1980s, but they never went away. And TC is this company that has made really good sounding ones for a long time. And tonight I'm actually using one of their old analog ones from the 80s, actually. I guess I bought it in the late 80s. Still works. And for a while I had a newer digital one, a really small one, in a pedal board that unfortunately I lost. It fell out of the back of my car. I didn't realize the car wasn't all the way closed. And fortunately, it was just my pedal board that fell out and not my laptop bag. That would have been much worse. So anyway, I think I would really miss those two if I didn't have them. There you go. And the brand of strings I use are these ones. I've got an open box here. Let's see, I've got a nicer looking one somewhere. Yeah, I do. Here, one that's not all ripped to shreds. This one here, they're made by Ernie Ball in California. And these are a relatively new kind of string that they started making recently. You can see that it says aluminum bronze. So they, like every string manufacturer for a long time, have made phosphor bronze strings. And this is a new alloy. So the whole idea with the aluminum bronze, and it took me a while to get used to it until I eventually realized I liked it, is that they have a lot less harmonic content in them. They're not as awash in harmonics. There's a much more strong fundamental, especially in the bottom couple of strings. Those two strings, I find the fundamentals very direct and a lot less sort of cloudy harmonics. So a lot of people say they sound more direct for that reason. So that's probably what they mean. So that's what I'm using now. And do you think we can reboot 2020? But the starting point would be after my Christmas show at Hugh's Room. I know, isn't that sad? Hugh's Room was already having a lot of, this is a venue in Toronto. It's a venue that I've played at probably about 40 times over the course of my career. I used to live in and around Toronto for many years. And so Hugh's Room became my my annual show. And sometimes I'd play there twice a year, my local show. And back in around 2002, I started a tradition of having a show between Christmas and New Year's every year, which my former agent, who's still a good buddy of mine, it was his bright idea, and I thought that nobody's going to come, He said, I think we should try it, and sure enough, the show sold out, because, there isn't much to do between Christmas and New Year's. Smart idea. So, So I just did the one, at the end of December this year, and the venue was shuttered for a little while because they sort of went belly up, and then it got bought out by a not-for-profit and reopened for about a year and a half, and then they got their rent jacked up on them, and right around the same time as the pandemic started. So the venue is looking for a new spot. All right, last question. What was it like making an album with Andy McKee? Well, it was great. Andy and I have been buddies for a long time. Andy started contacting me when he was a young man. I would get these emails from him. And I put out a record in 1999 called Passion Session. It was the first record that I had released in the U.S. And of course, before the internet, it was kind of hard to get your music outside, past national boundaries sometimes. So I had released already 6 albums in Canada for Canadian labels, including the Canadian version of Sony, but never had an international release. And so I was getting really frustrated because I was playing a lot in Europe, especially, and with no, I had to cart records over and all that stuff. I thought, this is dumb. Anyway, I eventually signed with Narada, this label that no longer exists. They were a victim of Napster when that happened. But I did 3 records for them, and when that album came out, I started hearing from Andy, and then I really liked his music, so I invited him to do some opening slots for me and to teach at my guitar weekend with me. And then I suggested that he get signed to Candy Rat Records, which happened. And then the world blew up for him on YouTube, so that's great. And then within a year or so, we decided to do a record together, and it was awesome. Andy's a wonderful guy. He's a aw shucks, personable, kind of lovely guy. And we get along really well. We kind of feel like brothers. So, and we see eye to eye musically, so that's awesome. So it was a lot of fun. All right. Yes, just before the song. I get it. No problem. Got it, Jeff. Jeff at HQ Control in Colorado. So, I switched there, and let me make sure this is happening. Can you hear that okay, Jeff? Is that guitar coming through okay? Because my tuner's in the way now. Let me see now. I'll try to get that out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. Sounds good. Okay, great. So you were asking about the fan fret guitar earlier. This one's kind of takes the cake, doesn't it? Both of my guitars are made by a really fine guitar builder out of St. Thomas, Ontario, Canada, and his name is Mark Beneteau. So Mark with a C, and his last name is Beneteau, so Beneteau. Not to be confused with the boats, Beneteau boats, Beneteau yachts or whatever. Anyway, he makes a yacht of a guitar, but he doesn't make a yacht of a boat. How's that for a nonsensical sentence? So over the course of the last 23 years, I've been working with Mark exclusively, and he's a great guy, another really sweet, gentle man, and who makes a killer instrument. And so he's made me, I think he's working on guitar number 10 right now. So over that time, he's made me a lot of guitars. So this one is from 2008, and this one is a baritone guitar. And it's got a really wide fan on it because the scale length is quite a bit longer than normal for a baritone, because you want it to tune really low. So you can hear that's a crazy low string. That's a G sharp on the bottom, or an A flat, however you want to look at it. So this tuning is it's another minor 11th chord. It's a A flat minor 11th, or A flat unfurnished, as I often call it. And this tune was inspired by a lot of the funk and R&B music I grew up listening to, and you'll probably hear evidence of that throughout. And when my youngest daughter, I wrote this when she was about 8 years old, and she said, "Hey, Daddy, I really like that funky new tune of yours, and why don't you name it after a movie monster?" And I thought, well, great, obviously my kid, a little bit loopy. I said, "Sure, Maya, what should I call it?" And you have to imagine an 8-year-old in a sundress, hands on hips, saying, "Dracula and Friends," So she thought that would be a great name for it. So I actually wrote 2 tunes that sound very similar, one for the regular guitar, one for the baritone. And this is the baritone one. And it's called Dracula and Friends Part 2. All right, a little showbiz there for you. Extended tunings open a new world. Any new tunings you've been jamming to lately? Well, to be honest, I haven't written too many new tunes lately. There's a bunch of reasons for that. The past 3 years, I've sort of been trying to figure out the future of the music biz and the future of my future in the music biz. So I've sort of been shifting gears a little bit. The recording side of things, you know, selling recordings and stuff like that has just become a big drag. I mean, nobody's buying discs anymore, and streaming, you know, pays so poorly that it doesn't really make much sense, really, to release an album anymore. I kind of don't see what the point is. So I've been instead sort of relying on my now rather large library of tunes. It's like over 150 solo guitar tunes that I've written over the years, and revisiting some of the ones that I, you know, haven't played in a while. I'll probably write some more new tunes, maybe release some sort of EP or something, just to have a new thing out. But I've been focusing more on writing orchestral music. So as far as the tunings I've been working on lately, I would say that there are a couple of new things I've been working on, but they're in tunings that I've already started using before. So I'm trying to reuse some tunings, because I use like over 100 tunings. It gets a bit ridiculous. So this one, for example, if it were a regular guitar, it would be like a C sharp minor 11th chord. So it works really nice for sort of lyrical stuff, you know, where you can do a lot of stuff with harmonics. So there's a tune that I won't bother playing right now, because I would have to woodshed it. I don't really remember it right now, but started recently working on it. It's in this tuning, and it's awesome. And the one that I wrote A Million Brazilian Civilians in, the C minor 11th tuning, been using that a lot lately. That and a variation on it with a B flat on the bottom, and also another variation with an E flat on the bottom. So those are all wonderful variations on the same idea. There you go. Do I use an EQ, and in which ones do I cut and boost? Thank you. You love my playing. That's very nice. I'm very happy to play for you. I'm glad you love it so much. In terms of EQ, yeah, I mean, this looks relatively clean up here. There's like tons of gear in front of me. Computer monitors and mixers and preamps and the receiver for this wireless microphone and my pedal board and blah, blah, blah. And almost everything has some equalization properties in it. So the preamps, you can do a lot of stuff with not only balancing the signals, but also equalizing the trebles and basses and middles and stuff. I find with this particular system, what I like about being able to do, the thing I like about the outboard EQ is that I can give the bottom a bit more of a chug, and it really sounds nice and fat through the PA. And then I tend to run the treble side kind of flat, and I don't use too much microphone because it tends to get into feedback issues and stuff like that if it's too hot. I just add enough to make it sound like moving air is happening and give it some microphonic live music sort of characteristics. And then I might notch the mids out a little tiny bit in this system, but just a bit. The mids and the highs are pretty good on this, and I just find I like to chug the bottom end. On this particular guitar, I also have a sound hole pickup. So I have the K&K system, the same one I have in the other guitar is also in this one, but this one also uses a magnetic sound hole pickup. This is an LR Baggs. I've had this one for a long time. And what this does is it adds, I'm not actually using it right now in my mix, because I figured it would be overkill for this. But when I play live, I can blend it in as well through another channel. And I really chug the bottom end on it. So I give the baritone kind of this larger than life bottom end, which is really fun. I mean, it just sounds incredible through a PA. And how often do I play other instruments for inspiration? When I'm writing my badass jams. Well, I play a lot of instruments, which is cool. I play, various kinds of guitar and other fretted instruments. But in my studio, which is just over there, I have an electric guitar, which it's a MIDI guitar, and I go through a Roland VG99, so I can get a lot of different electric guitar sounds through it in the studio when I need it. And then I also have a bass guitar, a fretless Fender jazz guitar, bass guitar. So I love playing that. I really wanted to be a bass player when I was a kid, but my older brother kept the bass and I kept the acoustic guitar. And then my older brother was really my first guitar teacher, so I thank him for. It's all his fault. And then other instruments, I play the dobro, the slide guitar on my lap. I also play the lap steel. And then I have this other thing which I've barely even started learning how to play yet. It's called a Kelstone, Kelstone. And it's a 9-string sort of tapping guitar, but you can also play it like a regular guitar if you want to. You can even play slide on it. It's crazy. Anyway, just look it up, Kelstone. It's a really interesting instrument. And it's kind of like a Chapman stick, but it's not like a Chapman stick. So it gives you an idea of what that's all about. And I'm a keyboard player as well, and drummer. So I kind of play a lot of different things. Those all, I think, end up, the keyboards really help me with my theoretical understanding of music, and I apply that to the instrument. And the drums really help with the groovy side of what I do. Yeah. And one more question before the next song. And the question is, for the songs that have no lyrics, what prompts me to use a capo? I actually almost never use a capo. I used a capo in that other tune because that's how I wrote it. And the reason I did it, the only reason I used a capo, was because I found that the tuning I was in, it's in a drop D tuning, and the spreads on the chords I wanted to use were so wide that even on a not fan fret guitar and a straight fret guitar, they were really hard to achieve. And my hands, I mean, I'm a large man, and my hands are big, but they're not ridiculous. My fingers are not ridiculously long like some players. So I found some of the moves I had to make really hard. So the capo, really the only reason it's there is to shorten the scale of the instrument a little bit and to make some of the finger positions much more achievable, because I didn't want to change them. I wanted to get the sonorities I was getting. So the only other time I use a capo is if I'm collaborating with someone else. And so, for example, my wife, Brooke Miller, is a singer-songwriter. And so when we play together, she's often in a weird tuning, like she uses that C minor 11 tuning that I like. She uses it a lot. And so that means that she ends up playing in keys like, come on, tuner, help me out here. Like, it's not cooperating. she ends up playing in keys like E flat and B flat and G minor and C minor, which are really not guitar friendly keys. The flat keys are not as guitar friendly. So I find that I really need to use a capo in order to
Hello everyone. It looks as if we have temporarily lost Don Ross's feed. I'm going to work with him to get that right back. As you can all imagine, this is the fun part about trying to conduct events across the country when the internet is saturated. Oh, and here he is back.
That's weird. Oh, it's back. I switched networks, so you might lose it again. Just let me know if I'm still on. Good. All right. Yeah, the internet's a funny place that way, isn't it? Losing connections. All right. Gonna slow it down a little bit and play a tune that was inspired by the music of Pat Metheny. And I love Pat as a composer. I mean, of course he's a dynamite guitar player, but he's one of those musicians who really makes me kind of forget what instrument he's playing. To me, the fact that he's playing a guitar almost is immaterial. The music is so lush, and I find it's so immersive that the fact that he's an amazing guitarist actually just serves the music, and that's really what I'm trying to do too. I'm trying to appeal to people who just like music. I'm not really interested in the guitar heads so much as just music fans. Just the guitar is so damn portable, it's awesome. It's a lot easier than carrying a keyboard on your back. And a very different tuning from the last piece, so just bear with me. So this piece has a very Pat Metheny sort of title. He gives us these lush, gorgeous tunes, these really sort of pedestrian names a lot of the time. Like, "Are you going with me?" You know, it's just, oh, come on. Come up with something more dynamic than that, Pat. You know, you're going to call your next tune, "Are you going to finish that?" Or what are you going to do? Anyway. No, respect. Nothing but respect. So this tune is called "With You in Mind," which to me sounds like a Pat Metheny title. And I don't always play it on the baritone, but it sounds lovely on this instrument. So let's see what we're going to get out of this today. Sorry, I realized that it had my volume down. Oops. Here we go again. Sorry, I was muted for the first verse of that song. With no PA and with no headphones on, just so I have to go on a wing and a prayer. Hope you can hear this. Uh, Tons of hearts and cheering. That's very nice to hear. Okay, next question is, do I have any inspirations for films / games / soundtracks specifically? I'm a fan of Castelnuovo Tedesco, who is a prolific composer for film.
Well, friends, it appears as if we have lost Don's feed once again. I will get him back on as soon as we possibly can. Do not worry, the event is not over. I suspect he just has to switch networks. In the meantime, I guess I can let you know there are 3 Don Ross courses on JamPlay. If you want to get access to them, we do have a spring sale going on right now with
He's really hot
huge discounts.
right now. He's one of the long list of Newmans. Alfred Newman, not of Mad Magazine, but there was a film composer named Alfred Newman who scored all kinds of films, especially in the mid to late 20th century. And he is the father of some of the Newmans, and he's the uncle of some of the rest of them. So Randy Newman is a relative of his, and Randy Newman, of course, has done a lot of film scores as well as sort of solo albums and stuff. And then Thomas, I think, is Randy's cousin. I think that's how it works. And there's yet another Newman who's also a film composer. So there's a lot of Newmans that are composing for film. I've been watching a lot of Netflix series to see what's happening right now. So there's a lot of great composers. The guy, I think his name is Steve Carey. He wrote the music for Homeland. The music for that show is fantastic. It's just some of the best scoring music I've heard in years. It's awesome. And then as far as games, I'm getting more and more acquainted with the people who are prolifically writing for games. I got to get more into that world. I've been focusing mostly on film and television, but part of my study that I'm doing is understanding more and more about middleware and all this kind of stuff to do with games and sound design. So I'm going to be looking into that as well. Next question. Are you using a chorus or is that an effect in the audio feed? Seems to come and go. Yeah, I'm kicking in and out a chorus pedal. So earlier, I don't know if you caught it, earlier I mentioned the TC chorus pedal, which I'm using one of the classic ones, the one that Michael Hedges actually used. They're so beautiful sounding. It's an old analog pedal and it's mono in, stereo out. It's also a pitch modulator and a flanger if you want to use it those ways. So it's like 3 different effects. And the chorus is fabulous. It's really great sounding. They also make a newer digital version of the chorus, which has a very similar sound. And I had one in a pedal board that unfortunately I lost out of the back of a vehicle. So when I replaced my pedal board, I thought, oh, I've still got this old, lovely old TC chorus, and it still works like a bomb. It's awesome. So there was no reason not to use it, except for the fact that it only runs on North American voltage. So that's a bit of a drag. When I bring it to Europe, I have to bring a step-down converter just for one thing. Everything else I have is dual voltage. Do I use harp harmonics from Buenos Aires? Harp harmonics, do you mean on the harp guitar or on the regular guitar? I'm not sure what you mean by harp harmonics. Harp harmonics are like on any string at the halfway point, like on the guitar it's at the 12th fret. You would touch the string and pick the note, and you get a harmonic, which is always there anyway. It's always part of the sound of the string. It's just that by doing that you're keeping the first harmonic, which is the fundamental, from sounding, and so you're just hearing the next one. So I'm not sure if that's what you mean. I was using a lot of it in that piece. And then, so they sound great, and this is a baritone, which is a really low-sounding guitar, but then you can get these really high sounds. On the harp guitar, which I think I'm not going to play tonight, it is sitting over there, but it's very unwieldy. It would be very difficult for me to sound check it properly. I can't really. I don't really use harmonics on the harp strings. I know there's some people like Muriel Anderson who uses that effect a lot. And great. How many more songs do I want to play? How about, what time are we at? How about I do, 2, 3 more? Does that make sense? How does that sound? Jeff in Colorado. Sounds good. Okay, great. Let's do that. What what I could do is, while I've got this guitar and then this tuning, I'll completely change pace here. Just getting better tune. Many years ago, I did an undergraduate degree in music, and I went to a school called York University in Toronto, Ontario. And York's program is very forward-thinking. It's very modern. And so when I was a student there, it was still the 20th century, so it was a very 20th century outlook they had. And these days, obviously, they've skipped a century and have that outlook. And so the cool thing was that I ended up being exposed to all kinds of music that has ended up having a really profound effect on me. And one of the composers that I discovered through my studies was a great composer out of New York City. His name is Steve Reich. And he's been at it now for a while. He's in his 80s now, and he's still very, very vital. He still plays live shows with his ensemble, with his little baseball cap on at the piano. He's such a cool guy. Anyway, I got to meet him a long time ago when I was a student at York. He came to Toronto to do the Canadian debut of a piece of his called Octet at the University of Toronto. And that same time, I got to meet people like John Cage and Yanis Xenakis. One of the coolest things that ever happened to me was John Cage came to my composition class, and we, invited other music students who were not in the class there. So there was about 30 of us in the room. And there was John Cage, as close as I am to the camera here, and he was just turning 70 that year, I remember. And we sat and we kibitzed before he started talking. I was telling him corny jokes, and he was laughing his head off. And he had this laugh like that. It was very funny. Anyway, delightful guy, and a very, very profound, insightful musician. But Steve Reich was, he's still at it, and he's still with us, and he has written a lot of what he calls canonic music, so music that uses short phrases that repeat a lot and that slowly change. So his pieces, of course, go on for 45 minutes. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to play you a tune that was inspired by his music. And I wrote this tune at a very difficult point in my life where my late wife, Kelly, had just passed away, and I was a single dad with little kids to raise and still a touring musician. It was nuts. So I think all the feelings and anger that I felt at my life situation came out in this tune. And I named it after a bad movie from the 50s called Robot Monster. If you get a chance, watch Robot Monster. It's on YouTube. You can watch the whole movie. It's ridiculous. It's so bad that it's beautiful. Trust me, watch Robot Monster. It'll change your life for the worse. Anyway, here's Robot Monster. Yeah, baby. All right. That's a workout, that one. Alrighty. A bit of clipping, yeah, no doubt. I'm clipping a little bit. All right. Uh, that's nice. That's very sweet. Nice to hear all the positive comments, folks. Thanks very much. Um, you heard the Canadian Guitar Festival is coming back, did you? Well, that looks like this year for most festivals is kind of not happening. Um, I had a bunch of stuff. Obviously, like most musicians, I've had literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of live shows canceled recently. And the guitar festival, there was a chance. Galvaz, the guy who runs the festival, was thinking about reviving it this year. And then the pandemic happened, and it's been pretty hard to plan for anything. We don't really know. Here in Canada, the government definitely, is encouraging us, well, not encouraging us, basically ordering us to stay home probably until at least June, because the models are showing that this pandemic could go on at least that long. So, with music, you need months of planning, very often 6 to 12 months ahead. You need to book things and make sure that all your T's are dotted and your I's are crossed. And so I don't think it's going to happen this year. It would be nice, but just not realistic. You know what I mean? And am I using any flamenco moves when I play? Not technically, or at least not officially. If I am, it's accidental. I'm a big respecter of flamenco players. I think their technique is incredible. It's very, very specific to that style and that part of the world, though. Really, it's like southern Spain, one little chunk of the world. And over the years, I've gotten to work with flamenco players, and including a young player that you may or may not have heard of. He's amazing. His first name is Pipo, so P-I-P-O, and his last name is Romero. Like the Romero family, but he's not one of the Romero family. He's a member of a Romero family, but not that one. So he's a young guy. He's like in his early 30s, and he's from Cadiz in the south of Spain, where flamenco really comes from. It comes from that whole area, Cadiz, Malaga, in there. And so he's just a terrific musician. And what he's doing is he's taking the flamenco tradition, but playing steel string fingerstyle to do it. So he's sort of going to a new territory. And there's people who talk about traditional flamenco and stuff like that, which is nonsense. It's like talking about jazz or something like that as a static art form, which it's not. Flamenco is always changing, and there are always these great new artists coming along and reinventing it to a certain extent. So Paco de Lucia, who died recently, he did a lot of things that the so-called purists thought were offensive, using a fretless bass guitarist, or having this big octet playing while the dancers danced or whatever. I don't know what the problem was. I got to see him, fortunately, the year before he died, and it was one of the most amazing concerts I've ever attended. It was so lush and so beautiful, and the musicianship was of such amazing quality. And to think that there was anything wrong with what he was doing, how silly. But that's a long answer to your short question. I don't really know anything about flamenco technique. I know that there's this thing called resgueado, which I can't do. It's basically where you rake across all the strings with your four fingers like that, one after the other, and you get that incredible sound. I do like a 5-finger arpeggio. Well, it's a fake 5-finger arpeggio. It's really a 4-finger arpeggio that sounds like 5 fingers, like this. And then I very often follow it up with a quick strum across the strings. And it was an affectation that I had for years without realizing it. And when I started teaching a lot of guitar lessons, people would say, "What is that thing you're doing there?" And I'd have to break it down. Oh yeah, you arpeggiate and then you follow with a brush. And one of my students started calling it a rasgueado. So I thought that was pretty cute. So it's become kind of nomenclature with me and my students. And do I have a preference for wood types in my guitars? That's a great question. What tends to work for me, like Mark and I have been working together for a long time. But before I worked with Mark, I played Loudon guitars for a long time. I didn't know anything about them. I bought one of their guitars when I was a university student and loved it. I just bought it without ever having heard of them before. I just picked it up and went, wow, this is my guitar. So that particular guitar, and I used it on a bunch of my early albums, and I used another guitar just like it for my next bunch of records. It was made of cedar on the top and mahogany on the back and sides. So it weighed nothing. It was this very light guitar and was really live as a result. And yet also cedar has this lovely mid-range kind of bias in the sound. Like there's just something about the sweet, lovely round mid-ranges that cedar has. So I still have a cedar guitar. It's not out with me here. It's in my studio. It's one that Mark made for me in 2011, I believe. And it's cedar and mahogany. And then, but these other guitars are sort of more built for the road. I'm an aggressive player, and I'm a big, strong guy, and I tend to be kind of hard on guitars. So this is spruce. I can't remember what kind of spruce it is. Maybe it's Engelmann, I'm not sure. And then the back and sides of this guitar are made of cocobolo. I'll try to get it out of the movie light. Here, cocobolo, you can probably see some of the grain in there. So it's like an African version of rosewood. So it's in the rosewood family. And so spruce and cocobolo works really well. I have several guitars with that combo. And my harp guitar is spruce on the top and paduk on the back and sides, another African hardwood. Great. So that's a great question. Thank you for that. I'll play another tune. Now, I'm actually going to play a tune in standard tuning. Shocker. I'm not one of those people who looks down on standard tuning at all. I love standard tuning. It's what I grew up playing. And it's like an old buddy. I come back to it every once in a while and write something in it. But I kept getting invited to do this blues event, and I'm not a blues guitarist at all. I was really surprised I was being asked, but I know some blues licks and some blues cliches, right? So most guitarists they know some, right? So, but don't ask me to be in a Stevie Ray Vaughan cover band; it just won't work. But finally, I thought, okay, well, I better write something that's kind of bluesy, just in case these people call me again. So I wrote this tune in the home of the blues, Berlin, Germany, that's right. And I tried to get every single blues riff and blues cliche I could think of into one tune. And this particular tune uses what's called, New York blues, sort of progression. So it's still a 12-bar blues, but it hops all over the map in terms of passing chord changes and stuff. So it's kind of a jazzy blues. Coming through okay, Jeff? Just making sure my settings are properly set up here. Thank you. All right. So I wrote this tune in Berlin, and they put bears on everything, the coat of arms and everything. So the tune is called Blue Bear. Yahoo! All right, another question. After I've been working on my master's degree, have I been exposed to any new music even that I've enjoyed? Oh, the crowd is going wild. Apparently, great. Yeah, what I've been studying a lot is music that is kind of some of the best stuff that's been written, especially for film. So I've actually discovered some composers that were very active, and some of whom have passed away since, that are kind of incredible. And I've also been discovering new composers, like I mentioned earlier. A guy that I just got to be more aware of, is a guy named Bernard Herrmann, so Herrmann. If you get a chance, check out his stuff. The reason I found out about him more carefully is that I had a homework assignment where I had to create what's called a mock-up. So it's basically like you're making a demo using your virtual instruments in your studio. So I'm using virtual strings, really well recorded string samples, and all the different articulations of string samples to recreate a performance of this thing. And it turns out that Bernard Herrmann wrote the soundtrack for the Hitchcock movie Psycho. He also did North by Northwest, and he did Vertigo, and one other one I forget. And he did like 4 Hitchcock films all in a row. Anyway, the Psycho soundtrack is iconic. It's amazing. Of course, with the knife. But the opening theme is just, it's nuts. It's a completely crazy piece of music. And the performance only takes about 2 minutes, but it's chock full of information. It's done for string orchestra. So I ended up doing this. I just finished it today. It took me about 2 weeks, almost solid, to create the mock-up so that it sounds basically like a live performance. You would think it's a string ensemble doing this thing. It's incredible. So I've found out about Bernard Herrmann. Of course, I knew about, I mentioned Robot Monster earlier, and there's a guy named Elmer Bernstein. Robot Monster must have been like his first commission back in 1953. But it's a terrible movie with actually a pretty good score. But he won an Academy Award. I think he did Nashville, the music for Nashville in the 70s. And he went on to score all kinds of great films. So you can start humble and still win Academy Awards. Okay, 2 more questions. Do I compose on the guitar mostly while playing, or compose on paper in my head and then move to guitar? Both. I tend to be more of an in-my-head composer. Very often I'll get an idea just when I'm walking down the street, and I'll think, hey, I should try that when I get home, and then I'll pick up the instrument and work on it. Or another cool way to work is to work at the keyboard. So sometimes I'll sit at the piano, because I'm a pretty good piano player. I wouldn't say I'm a great piano player, but guitar is definitely my first instrument, but piano is a strong second instrument. And I'll come up with some ideas on the piano, and I'll think, hey, I hadn't really considered that before. And what's good about the piano is that it's basically like this huge graphic user interface, right? And you get everything's in front of you, and you can just sort of go, can try this chord, try that chord, and I know exactly what chord it is, right? And my hands also go to different places on the piano than they would on the guitar. When I pick up a guitar, there's a lot of familiar territory there where you like to your hands like to go. Whereas in the piano, because it's not my first instrument, I'm a little bit more like walking through the woods discovering stuff. So sometimes I'll write on the piano and then learn the tune on the guitar afterwards. I've done that a few times. All right. And the last question I'm going to take tonight is, do I try to play as much each day now that I'm not on tour? How many hours per day? A lot of people ask that question. For me, the hours per day thing was much more when I was younger and learning. And also when I had like copious amounts of spare time, especially in the summers and stuff like that. But I mean, when you're a kid, right? You're at school, you do your homework, then what? I wasn't much of a TV watcher, and I didn't hang out at the mall, and I didn't get into trouble. Basically, I stayed home and played my guitar, and I put in a lot of hours when I was younger. And back then I would probably play, 8 hours a day easy, and without getting tendonitis and stuff like that. When I became a professional musician, I was playing all the time. I was either playing on stage, or I was writing, or I was recording, or I was teaching. So the instrument was in my hand a lot, maybe just as many hours. But I wouldn't say I was practicing. I don't really practice so much, except if I want to revive some tunes in my repertoire to play on a tour, and I'll think, hey, I've got this really great body of work that I should exploit more, and I'll go back and revisit some of the tunes and woodshed those. By woodshedding, I mean practice. So so that they're ready for playing live. Yeah. Alrighty. So I don't really put in the hours per day like I used to, but I'm doing music like all the time. It's kind of just basically all I do. When I'm not out walking in the woods or riding my bicycle or walking the dogs or hanging out with my wife, I'm playing music. So there we go. All right. I'll play one more tune for you. Maybe I'll do this to sort of slow it down to end the night. It's been really a pleasure to play for you. This is always a bit weird, playing with no audience. It's not what I'm used to. And I feel like I run my own TV station these days. This is the second streaming concert I've done this week. I did one for the Chinese market a few days ago. And so also I'm going to be doing another one on April 23rd for the National Arts Center in Ottawa, in our nation's capital. They're doing a whole series of streaming concerts to replace their season, basically, which had to be canceled. So that's cool. They've hired musicians from all across Canada to do these shows. Oh, that's nice. There were over 600 people who watched tonight. That's awesome. Thanks for joining us. And also, just a parting wish that everybody stay healthy. And one of the best ways you can stay healthy is by listening to the good sense of epidemiologists and immunologists, okay? Don't go with the conspiracy theorists, please, okay? Stay at home as much as you possibly can. Don't go outside unless you really have to. Even if you're going to go out and go for a run or a jog or a bike ride, you got to make sure you're not around other people, because it's too easy to spread this thing. And the thing that people have to remember too is that you may be fine. You may end up just feeling like you have a cold, or you may have nothing. You may be completely asymptomatic, and then you can go home and give it to your partner, or give it to your kids, or God forbid, give it to an elder or somebody with a compromised immune system. So please be careful, okay? Please be careful. Keep your distance until this blows over. Wash your hands like crazy, all right? Stay at home. And by staying home, you'll save lives. Okay, thank you very much. And this has been a nice compromise, a nice way to reach out and see live music, and for me to have some contact with you, despite the fact that we're not in the same room. So I'm all for it. So thanks very much to jamplay.com for making this possible. And I'm sure I'll see you down the line, if not online, maybe at a live show one day. Here's a tune called Berkeley Springs. This is written by David Essig, and this is my arrangement of it that I recorded on my Passion Session record 20 years ago now. Thanks for watching and listening, everyone. See you soon.
Now, friends, I have an announcement before we go. We actually do have some exciting news coming up about another live show tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. If you go to truefire.com/live, you are going to be able to see 3 live concerts from Josh Smith, Charlie Apicella, forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong, and Jennifer Batten. And as you might know, and as you can see my shirt, True Fire and Jam Play are brother and sister now. So be sure to check out all their live events and all our live events that are coming up. And we look forward to seeing you soon. And I just realized I had the wrong view up. Take care, and as Don said, be safe, and we'll see ya.